New back-to-back sounds. Listen now on BBC Sounds.
How's the single life been?
It's great. I'm on all the apps. I'm like swiping up and down and left and right.
So what are you doing? Picking up chicks in a bookstore like an off-brand Hugh Grant?
Are you seeing anybody now?
That's the whole story.
With you, it always is.
Hang in there. It is all worth it.
The brand new series of Love Life. Press red for all episodes on BBC iPlayer.
Coming up at 10, the Chancellor comes round to the idea of a windfall tax on energy firms. Every household in the UK will get a £400 payment to ease the cost of living crisis. And we'll have the latest on the school shooting in Texas. Join us at 10.
Looking back and moving forward now on BBC One, famous faces and a hunt through family history. The brand new series of Who Do You Think You Are?
Comedian and broadcaster Sue Perkins is well known for her global travel shows and for co-presenting the Great British Bake Off.
You have 2 hours on this challenge. On your marks.
Get set. Break.
A lot of my life has been about propulsion, about going forward, about doing everything, about saying yes to everything, about having this kind of, perpetual motion. And I suspect that it's losing my dad that has made me want to stop in my tracks a little bit more. Take stock of what I have and all the joy and the good fortune that I have and be grateful for it. But also to turn around and examine things a little bit more closely. Some people might find their sort of spiritual dimension in a lotus pose. I find mine in an uppercut. I'm somebody who spends a lot of time in my own head and my brain is very, very busy. And what boxing does is it dulls the chitter-chat. Everything is just seamlessly working together and there's a kind of flow and a relaxation to it. And I love it.
Sue grew up in Croydon, the oldest of 3 children with dad Bert, who passed away in 2017, and mum Anne.
In my mind, there's 2 very distinct emotional branches to the family. From my dad's side, I get empathy, a love of people, but also a fear of people and what they can do. On my mum's side, I get drive. I get this sense that there's a hand, like a historical hand in the small of my back, just moving me on. Never being able to sit still, never being able to rest, never ever letting my brain go to sleep.
Jump up.
Really, the engine of life, the engine of social history, is grafters. And I have a real sense that I have the privilege I have on the back of people who had nothing and worked for every scrap. We're a conflation of all the pain and suffering and fun and movement of our ancestors. And I guess I want to pinpoint that. Are they like me? What bits of them do I carry forward? What bits of them should I try and remove to be a better person, a nicer person, a kinder person? This is the opportunity to become an emotional detective.
Sue has a box of family photos her mother has given her and wants to go through them with friend and comedy partner Mel Gedroich, who has known the Perkins family for decades.
Hello, sausage.
Hello, George. Come on in, mate.
Right, I bring
Gifts.
quite a knackered ancient box. Slight hint of 7 about this, isn't there?
Right.
Welcome to an old Perkins bringing older Perkins.
Someone got very busy with the parcel tape.
No expense spent on that. I mean, here's some family artefacts. I've just shoved them in an old box.
Oh.
We start with the great one.
Oh, there's your lovely dad.
There's Bertie.
Such a nice man.
Twinkly-eyed.
Twinkles and grin.
He was a good egg, wasn't he? Normally, like, Mum would be here, or a family member, but you know what it's like? My mum would start crying, then I'd start crying, then my sister would get wind of the fact that my mum and I had started crying, then she'd start crying.
No,
then
she'd get cross.
Then
And
she'd
then
ring
cry.
around, then everyone would cry and get cross, and then the programme wouldn't be able to be made because of this basically emotional dominoes.
Oh.
Do you have that, or is it just my family? That silence says it's just my family.
This is your mum and dad's wedding, isn't it?
By Jove, you've got it. I mean, all the clues were there.
Oh. Your mum's lovely.
Yeah.
But my eye is immediately drawn.
Yes, I know where it's going.
Immediately. I mean, obviously...
Are you playing to the left of Dad? Is that hair or hat? Right, okay. Because I want you to know that our family have been playing shower cap or barnet for decades. I don't know. I think it's a hat, mate. I think it is.
Mate, I'm going hair.
I don't think human hair can be woven into that shape.
Oh, look.
So that's Florence.
Oh, that's Florence and Bertie's mum.
Bertie's mum. She was the kindest person I've ever met, I think.
Really?
Honestly, it's just like she radiated goodness and sweetness. So that's David, my dad's identical twin brother.
Absolutely.
Right.
OK. Oh, wow.
Who do you reckon that is?
So that's got to be Anne's mum.
Lydia, my maternal grandmother.
She looks like she's ruling the roost, actually, Lydia.
Always furs and hands like that.
She looks mum.
She'd have been heading off to work after that.
Amazing.
She worked until... I mean, I just don't remember a time when she wasn't working. I know that she was the daughter of immigrant parents. I don't know much more than that. But presumably that drive comes from there.
Hell yeah.
Well, that's where yours... I mean, it's the same thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Do you feel that?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Make something of yourself. You know, prove to other people.
Push.
Push, yeah, definitely.
And even when there's no more pushing to be done, push.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, my God, I love this.
So, these two are Lydia's parents. Now, this is as far as my understanding goes. So that's Anna and that's Emile. And those two are Lydia's parents. My great-grandparents.
And these are all their
That's
children?
the family. Lovingly arranged in a sort of circular constellation.
8 kids?
8 kids. I know that there was some kind of German connection and some kind of Eastern European connection, and part of me is hoping it's Lithuania, because I really like the idea that my ancestors were toshing around the same neck of the woods as yours.
That would be amazing.
That would be so odd. Where were yours from?
Lithuania.
But whereabouts? Do you know where?
We hail from a place called Gedrai, which is...
Gedroich town.
Gedroich town. You'll probably be from Perkinichai. Perkinichai. I'm hoping.
I'm going to look. Right. That's Albert, married to Florence, so my dad's dad. I know nothing about my granddad, other than he was very short and moustachios, and I think got bits of him blown off in every major conflict in the late 19th, early 20th century.
Wow.
I never met him. I only know what little I'm told, which is that, yeah, he was rarely around. So essentially, Florence ruled the roost.
Yeah, she did all the upbringing.
He was so old when my dad was born.
Oh, was he?
I think he was in his early 60s.
This isn't Florence.
It is Florence. Young Florence.
Oh, sweetie.
So interesting, the portraiture. What's that?
Bodmin.
Oh, God, you are good at detecting. Well, they got married maybe in Bodmin.
Oh, maybe. Is this the wedding? This is the wedding day. Is this the wedding day?
I don't think so, because she's on her own. Don't traditionally the bride and groom get together on the wedding day? I mean, I don't know. I've never been married.
Interesting.
What's this? This looks official.
Who have we got here? Marriage solemnised at St Mary's Roman Catholic Church, Bodmin.
OK, yes, they got married there. So this is Albert.
Married in Bodmin.
Florence.
He's 41, she's 22.
Yeah, much, much older.
Much, much older.
What year?
1917.
Look, in the middle of the war.
Yeah. So he was a serving sergeant.
Has he just deserted from the sort of French battlefields to go and get married in Bodmin?
Who knows?
Wow, there they are. It's Florence and Albert.
Oh, it's a bygone era, isn't it? He's just sheer kind of...
Gender roles really, really ascribed, you know. He's pipe and slippers, as you say.
Yeah. She was a midwife, wasn't she?
She was a midwife.
Oh, hello.
What's this?
Swanage District Nursing Association.
Go on then, read it. You've got your reading papers on.
So, June the 10th, 1937. Dear Mrs Perkins, could you oblige the Swanage Nursing Association by taking relief duty, nurses and patients both have kindly recollections of you. And it's, it's really sweet.
Don't you go now. No, don't you go now.
It's not my show, and I'm going.
Stop it now, because
Sorry.
if you go, then I'll go.
I can't read that bit.
Stop. I deliberately wanted to talk to you so I didn't have my mum crying, and now you've gone and now you've
It's
set
just
me off.
really sweet. It's very lovely about her.
They both got kindly recollections of you, and it's nice to feel that sick people have someone they like to look after them.
It's really sweet.
Sue's box of family photos has inspired her to find out about her maternal great-grandparents, Emile and Anna, and also her paternal grandparents, Albert and Florence. She's starting with Albert, the grandfather she never met.
I've come to Bodmin to find out a little bit more about Florence and particularly about Albert, about whom I know absolutely nothing. As far as I'm concerned, it's exactly like this landscape, bleak, remote and utterly unknowable.
Sue is meeting genealogist Maggie Lewis.
Hi there. You Maggie?
Yes, I am.
Hey Maggie, I'm so nice to see you.
Hello there.
I'm glad it's you, because otherwise I'd have to look for another genealogist on a windswept road in the middle of Bodmin.
I think I'm the only one, so it must be me. We're out here because this lovely old church is where your grandparents got married in 1917. Unfortunately, we can't go into that because it's now luxury housing.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
I think that's what God would have wanted.
So all you have, really, is that photograph.
And the name Albert.
Well, let's find a bit more about him now, shall we? So should we look at the first document that you've got there?
Let me change.
Into your other glasses.
Yes, to the binoculars for this. Oh, suddenly, everything's clear.
Right, OK. So can you see what it says there, Sue? It's actually a birth certificate for Albert, your grandfather.
There he is. So born in Axminster.
Yeah.
And my granddad Albert is born 19th of December 1875.
That's right.
To Henry and Fanny Perkins. He's a railway signal fitter, so he's got a trade.
Yeah.
His dad.
I don't know if I really want to show you the next certificate.
Oh, no, why?
But I think you need to have a look at it.
All right, OK. So this is a death certificate?
Yes.
Oh, so this is the death of my granddad's mum?
Yeah. When he would have only been about 6 months old.
That's awful. OK, so in accident, so she's registered the birth and just a few months later she's dead?
Yeah.
She's 36 years old. That's awful, isn't it? The psychological effect. Very, very pronounced.
But let's move on to the next document, which is the 1881 census.
So Albert is
5.
yeah. I can see Henry Perkins, Albert's dad. He's remarried to Mary Ann. And they've
got Sidney Herbert Perkins, Albert's older brother. Albert.
Who's 5.
Yeah. And then they've had a daughter.
Bessie.
At
least at this point, there's a new wife who we hope's not the wicked stepmother, but a loving sweetie.
Yeah.
And that it's a love match and suddenly everything is a bit rosier.
Well.
Oh, no.
I'm afraid.
It's not good news, is it?
It's not good news. So this is from the year after that census was taken.
Oh, dear. So, what is becoming a slightly familiar trope in Albert's life? This is 82 and it's a death certificate, and this is his dad, who's dead at 52.
He died of tuberculosis.
So my granddad has lost his mum at 6 months old, and by 6 years old he's lost his dad and is now in the care of, we hope, his stepmother.
Can I stop you at that point?
Oh, no.
Unfortunately...
No, this is just awful. This is so awful.
Mary Ann, the stepmother, has already died. She died a few months earlier. So at this point, poor old Albert has lost everybody, really.
This is the sort of stuff of Dickens, really, isn't it?
It is. So if we move on to the next documents, this is the minute book for the Exeter Workhouse, because obviously with these orphan children, where do they go? they go into the workhouse.
I had no idea. I had no idea my grandfather grew up in a workhouse.
No. Because it was seen as quite a shameful thing. Although it was of no fault of their own, it would have been very much hidden, and he probably would never have wanted to talk about it anyway. But if you'd like to have a read of the minute book...
So this is the 19th of December. It's still 82.
Yeah, and does the 19th of December ring any bells?
That's the birthday of my grandfather.
Yes, so his 7th birthday. So if you'd like
This doesn't
to...
feel like a commemoratory, celebratory document of his birthday. Mr. Perkins of Frome, a watchmaker, applied to have his nephew, Sidney Perkins, an orphan, aged 10 at the workhouse, delivered over to his charge.
So on Albert's 7th birthday, his brother...
is taken away from him.
Yeah, it does seem so brutal, doesn't it? To leave him behind.
It's awful.
Have a look at this photograph, Sue. It is indicative of the sort of uniform that children in the workhouse would have worn, and there would have been a very strict regime, and if you stepped out of line, he probably would have had a beating.
Well, I mean, yeah, I imagine that already the emotional damage is way more, yeah.
But let's look at this next one. So this is the following October.
So we're sort of 10 months on, aren't we?
Yeah.
Read a letter from the Reverend Hobson on behalf of Mr. Francis Perkins. Come on, Francis.
Yes.
Asking that his nephew Albert, aged 7, an orphan in the workhouse, might be discharged in order that he might be sent to him, to be brought up by him in his own family. I'm going again now. Because that's, you know, that makes it clear that he's going to be with his family and taken care of.
Yes.
Oh, dear.
So he's finally out of the workhouse.
I'm going to make sure that I can't read any more documents now by going to my...
Yes,
so you can't damage my eyes with any more of this sadness. Wow. Thanks, Maggie.
Pleasure.
When you never met somebody, you have to make assumptions, and my assumption, looking at the photo of Albert, was that he was a rather strict, taciturn Victorian gentleman whose pain had been forged on a battlefield. And then I hear about his life and all that he endured as a kid, unimaginable sorrow as a child. And that's where the pain comes from, the pain of losing your mum before you can even put a name to her, before you can even say the word mum out loud.
Having found out about her grandfather's traumatic childhood, Sue now wants to know how his army career affected him. She's meeting military historian Andy Robertshaw at Bodmin Keep.
So, Andy, I guess I never met my granddad till this morning. The man is starting to emerge from the sort of the flat image.
Yeah.
I just know he was in the army, so that bit I'm clear on.
OK.
Right.
Right. Well, look, what you've got in front of you is an attestation paper. He's joining in 1892 and he's joining for 12 years into the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry, whose headquarters we're in. He's joined what's known as the military family. You know, this is what's going to be, from now on, his home.
Which he's in dire need of, having seen, obviously, the poverty and the sadness that have checkered his sort of from childhood onwards.
Yes, and if you look at the next page, it gives us some information about him.
It's saying he's 5 foot 5.5 inches.
Yeah.
My dad had this joke. He was saying the only reason he survived as long as he did was the bullets and the bombs went straight over his head.
Yes, you are better off being shorter, certainly in combat. But what's interesting there is his age.
He was born in 1875, so he's, what, 17? Now, he said he's 18 here.
It says there the age physically equivalent to.
So, hang on. They would just look him up and down,
Yeah.
and the look of him was enough for them to go, he's an adult.
Absolutely. He ends up going off to India, 1897 to 98. Then he comes back to the UK, and then the Boer War breaks out. But guess what? He doesn't make it to South Africa.
Why not?
Because they send him to guard Boer prisoners in Ceylon, what is now Sri Lanka. And he goes to Sri Lanka and he guards prisoners for a couple of years, then the war ends, then he comes back again. And then in 1914, the Great War begins in July, and he decides in August he's going to volunteer, age about 40. He doesn't have to join up anymore, but back, here he comes, and this time it's going to be a different experience.
So he's done all of this as a single man.
Yeah.
He's come home just at the point where you think he might give it all up, get married, have a few kids. He's still got his eyes on the horizon, volunteers again.
Yeah. He then goes off to, well, where would you think?
The Somme, to Ypres, to... Well, he could have gone to Italy, he could have gone...
Ah, you're getting close, because actually they send him, wait for it, to Salonika. We sort of think about Greece as being lovely as a holiday resort. In the middle of winter in the mountains, it's grim. And he's not there very long before he's back in the UK. And the reason for that, really, is on the next piece of paper.
Ah, OK. Now, Perkins, Albert Edward, so far so good.
Yeah.
He's been discharged.
Correct. This is right at the end of the war. But what brings him back from Salonika to here and how he then meets your grandma is also on that piece of paper.
Disabilities.
Yeah.
Trench foot.
Correct.
Florence, what was it about the man with trench foot that really lured you into marriage? That sounds awful.
It is.
What is it?
If your feet are in water for a long time, the circulation starts to die off in your toes, and they die even though they're actually still fastened to your feet.
OK, so he's sort of got a blackened, atrophied foot, or
Well,
2 feet.
Have a look at the next image you've got there.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that is an extreme case of trench foot.
You've really saved the best to last, haven't you?
Well,
I mean,
I'm
I think this deserves... Oh, I wish I hadn't put those other glasses on now.
That's a very extreme case. Oh, well,
awful.
It wasn't quite so bad for him, but many people are disabled by it. We know he's discharged, but he actually gives basically a post office address, a post office box.
Yeah.
And look where it is.
Bulford Camp in Salisbury.
Correct, Wiltshire.
For some reason I've heard of it, and maybe I think my dad was born there.
Ah.
So I guess I need to get me to Salisbury Plains.
Sue has come to Bulford Camp, where Albert and Florence lived after they married. She now wants to focus on her grandmother, Florence, who she knows was a midwife. She's meeting historian Tanya Staras.
So this is where your grandparents were living and working in the 1920s?
Unbelievable. My dad used to talk about Bulford Barracks, and to be here is quite something.
Yeah. I mean, there's houses here now, but then it was all cottages. And they would have been living cheek by jowl with other families, bringing up their young family themselves.
Super sociable.
Super sociable, yeah, lots going on. And then one day, Florence came to Albert and said, right, that's it. I'm not going to be staying at home anymore. I'm going to train to be a midwife. For him to have supported her to do that, to go and do the training and to come back and work, you know, that took some guts on his part to say, actually, you don't need to be the little woman in the house, you know?
No.
You can live your own life.
Yes.
So your grandmother would have been one of the first women who actually had training for their role as a midwife. So she was quite special, quite unusual.
She was totally special.
Before the 1900s, midwives suffered from a bad reputation, often branded as drunk and unreliable. To regulate the profession, official training was introduced. Students had to pay for their own equipment, uniforms, and exam fees. An expensive commitment for working-class women like Florence. Sue's grandmother trained for 12 months, getting hands-on experience and attending lectures. In May 1928, she qualified.
This is a woman who's never had any formal education whatsoever.
Yeah, well, she would have had to go to lectures where they used Latin and Greek terminology because they'd be talking about the body, they'd be talking about the physiology of it, the processes of labour and birth, what to do in an emergency situation for when there wasn't a doctor available. So the range of things that she did in that year is magical, really.
She's a mother, but she's a working mother now, and she's training, and her kids are presumably with my granddad.
Yes.
You're just running around to here.
Yeah.
And Albert, this sort of remote, hands-off dad, is anything but that. Because he's basically said to his missus, go on, fly.
You go and do your thing, yeah.
I'll be here.
Yeah, yeah.
I love him.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've ever been able to say I love him.
Before you leave Bulford, I've got a few documents I thought you might be interested in looking at, just to give you a bit more of the story of your grandmother. The first one we've got is not actually Salisbury.
No, it's Southampton in 1936.
About a third of the way down, you'll see a Mrs. F.M. Perkins.
Florence Mary Perkins from Salisbury.
Yeah. Rather than midwives just relying on making money through cases individually, getting paid by women, after they'd had a baby, they were actually going to have salaried midwives. So the money that you made wouldn't be dependent on how many births you had. These posts, these municipal posts, were pretty well sought after. People really wanted them. So they could pick and choose who they took. And your grandmother obviously applied for one of these jobs down in Southampton and got it.
It's amazing, isn't it?
You did have to be something special to be appointed to be a municipal midwife.
I don't know, I always thought my maternal grandmother was the career woman, but I look at this and this is somebody who's having their cake and eating it.
Absolutely.
Who's a mum and a working mum.
They started employing midwives from 1937 onwards, and then 2 years later,
the war.
We get the war. And if you look at the next picture, obviously she was working in Southampton.
Yes, which was absolutely a major target, wasn't it, of the Luftwaffe.
And you can see what it must have been like for her continuing to go through those streets and to deliver those babies and give that care. You couldn't stop. You couldn't say, right, that's it, I'm walking away from this. And if you look at the last bit of document, right at the bottom of the page, it talks about steel helmets for midwives.
OK, the Medical Officer of Health submitted a letter from Mrs Harvey requesting the committee to provide steel helmets for midwives as part of their uniform. It was resolved upon a show of hands that no action be taken. No action be taken.
Yeah. So the midwives were saying, it's dangerous out there are bombs dropping.
Who's responsible for this? You absolute tools. So yeah, they're saying it's dangerous and they've said, don't worry, girls.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Midwifery is still an incredibly powerful profession. But to do it then, during the Blitz, the mind boggles, quite frankly.
I guess my grandparents' story is they made extraordinary things happen for themselves. They grafted, they got professional qualifications, they travelled the world. And more importantly, in a patrician, male-dominated world, they found each other, and my grandma was allowed to fly. And yet, they died with nothing. They gave all their lives in service.
Sue now wants to investigate her mother's side of the family, the Mullers. She thinks that her grandmother Lydia's father, Emil, came from Germany.
I was fortunate enough to know my grandma Lydia, but her parents are shrouded in mystery. I know they were immigrants. I don't know much more than that. I have a census from 1911 that tells me that they all were around this area. And I do remember my granny saying that she used to walk furs up and down this bridge, and that was her job, to just deliver bits of old dead animal up and down. So suddenly it's very real. I know that my grandma Lydia lived on Emerson Street, so that's where I'm heading. In fact, I think it's here, and it's number 11 that I'm looking for. But if this side of the family history turns out like the other side's family history, then I'll be very, very surprised. A, if the building's still there, and B, if there's a plaque saying, Lydia Muller lived here. Oh, God, what have you done with it? That's my nan's house!
Sue is meeting author Robert Winder to find out about Emil and Anna.
So, Robert, what I have, really, in terms of knowledge about my maternal great-grandparents is this rather fetching photo, and don't they look happy?
You've got her eyes.
All four of them.
Well, first, we have their marriage certificate.
Ooh. OK, so this is the solemnisation of their marriage in 1901. St Paul's, German Reformed, Emil Gustav Muller and Anna Tislau. He's 23, she's 22. He's a tailor, a presser. And the professions of both of their fathers seem to be farmers. So Reformed, does that mean they're Lutheran?
Yes, it does. I mean, St Paul's, it's not the St Paul's behind us. There were 6 German Lutheran churches in London at that time.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Because there was this large community of Germans. If we turn over the next thing, the 1911 census.
Emil, Gustav and Anna Müller.
Emil's listed as a tailor, supporting 6 children, right here in Southwark.
The thing I remember lots about my grandmother, she's a big figure in my life, was this sort of booming Cockney voice. And yet here, when you look at the census, she's very firmly listed as German. And it was something that she never spoke about, wasn't interested in owning. She was a Londoner.
Yes. But of course, at this time, there was the beginnings of some animosity against the Germans.
German culture had long been admired by the British. Queen Victoria had married the German Prince Albert, and Christmas trees, kindergartens and delicatessens had been embraced by the nation. But in 1914, war was declared, and Germans in Britain, like the Müller family, were looked on with suspicion. A year later, suspicion turned to anger when a German U-boat sank a British passenger ship called the Lusitania.
The papers were full of these kind of images, the greatest crime of the war, etc.
It says here, everywhere one looked, one saw a sea of waving hands and arms belonging to struggling men and frantic women and children in agonising efforts to keep afloat. That in itself is enough, isn't it, to just suddenly turn a populace against itself.
And that is precisely what happened, because pretty much the next day...
Oh, my word. This is not a scene that I could have ever associated with London. There's a baying mob, people being pulled out of their homes, and of course the Daily Sketch really going for it. Jail is the home for the Hun in wartime. Clear out the Germans, say the people. The above pictures were taken during attacks on shops in Poplar, so actually not very far from my great-grandparents.
Yes, they could have been in this crowd.
It's not a big leap for me to make, to change the F Müller in this shot to an E Müller, and for it to be my great-grandfather's shop that has a brick through it and a crowd outside waiting.
Yes, and in London, 2,000 German businesses got smashed. And very soon they had more immediate concerns, because, of course, the next thing that happened was that Germans here were interned.
After widespread rioting, the British government rounded up all German men, including Emil, as they were now considered a threat to national security.
He went to Stratford, where he was processed, and he joined one of those terribly sad, shuffling queues of people who were being led away from their lives, their families. And we have the form, the processing form, with the list. It's a list of German arrestees, so see if you can...
God, so in between the Maringers, the Hillers, the Hoffmans, there you go, Müller, Emil, Gustav, he's 38. They've got him, they've got everything there. They've got the home address, so he's on 11 Emerson Street, Southwark. And the place of internment, KCK.
Well, they built an internment camp, a barracks, in the Isle of Man called Knockela.
Sue has travelled to the Isle of Man, where Emil was interned.
I can't begin to imagine how my great-grandfather Emil felt coming here. He's suddenly in a strange place, frightened, possibly in fear of his life. And he's left a family, a wife, a business, but of course none of those things matter. It doesn't matter he's a tailor or a husband or a proud father, because coming here, all that matters is he's a German.
Sue is meeting Professor Stefan Manz at the Knockela Visitor Centre.
So, Stefan, give me some broad brushstrokes about what this place would have been like. How would Emil have found it?
Well, in order to illustrate that, I can show you a picture straight away. If you want to turn to your pile.
Oh, a pile is good, right.
A pile of pictures we've got. So this is Knockela camp. It held 23,000 internees at its peak.
So they just made the assumption that it was easier to deport all Germans, 23,000, just in case one was a spy.
Yes,
it
exactly.
would be safer.
Yeah.
And what were the conditions like?
When it comes to conditions, you might want to look at the next picture. You will see the inside of a hut. So one of these could be your great-grandfather. These huts were shared with 30 other people. There was very little private space. There was no door they could shut behind themselves in order to keep the constant noise blocked out. And many men you see on this picture would have suffered from barbed wire disease. This was
a sort of mental
psychosis,
yes.
Exactly. So this barbed wire psychosis was fed by a sense of isolation, being away from one's family and friends for years, then being close with others who they didn't really know, and then it was that total lack of privacy.
The term barbed wire disease was coined by a visiting Swiss psychiatrist. Many men suffered from it. Some even took their own lives. The authorities realized that activity would help combat the inmates' boredom and frustration. They encouraged hobbies, amateur dramatics with men playing female roles, and sport, shown here in propaganda photos, taken to prove how well the men were treated.
So if you want to look at the next picture, keeping themselves busy.
Yes! Boxing! And that's a very well-developed quad on the right, fantastic. You can see the barbed wire there. Obviously, that's the first thing I think of. I suppose a good way in this instance of letting out rage, of all that frustration.
Yeah, and there's another boxer who's in Nokelo, whose name you certainly know. Joseph Pilates.
Well, I'm imagining we're talking about the man who invented spinal release. So the Pilates
exactly,
that
that's
we know,
the man.
And, know and love. My great-granddad might have known the dude that invented Pilates.
Yes, exactly. So if you want to look at the next one. So what do you see there?
Sewing machines. So what's going on here?
Yes, that was a tailor's workshop. So in a way, your great-granddad was lucky because he had a profession he could carry on doing in the camp. It kept him busy. A grocer wouldn't have been able to sell groceries. A plumber wouldn't have been able to go about his plumbing business. But he really had a purpose. He was able to repair the clothes of other internees because he just didn't know how long it would take for them to be released.
You look at this and you think how fortunate that Emil had a job he could sustain in this environment. But also my grandmother grew up just seeing how hard her mother had to work to put food on the table.
For your great-grandmother, it would have been a matter of survival. The main breadwinner was interned for 4 years and she just had to keep the tailor's business open. So she would work day and night in order to do that and support her family.
Nobody in my family just talks about this time. They didn't talk about any of it. My grandma Lydia never talked about any of her past.
This is not surprising, because your great-granddad didn't return as a hero from the war. This is probably the picture when he had just been released. It's a picture taken around 1920.
You see, I'd seen this picture. This was in the box of pictures that my mum had, but I had no context for it. So I look at this entirely differently than I did when I saw it a few days ago. Now it feels like it's great they're all together, but I can see suffering there and world weariness. And I look at my grandma differently. There's Lydia on the left, and she's got used to probably not having a dad, and there he is. The head of the family's returned, but they've survived.
They've survived.
But I just think of the amount of hatred they must have endured just for coming from another country. They were innocents, you know. I now have, thanks to you, a really rounded sense of what Emil went through in the war and what the family went through with him and in his absence. So next up, I think, is Anna, my great-grandmother.
Do you want to have a look at the census record of 1901? Find the name of your great-grandmother right in the middle.
Yep.
Anna Tislau.
Tislau.
Yeah.
She's 21.
And where born, you might be able to make out the country on the right-hand side.
Russia.
Yeah, and the town, Novininkai. It used to be part of Russia, where she was born, but it's today actually part of Lithuania. And this is probably where you need to go next to find out about your great-grandmother.
Do you know what? I can't even tell you how delighted I am it's Lithuania, because Mel, who I work with and who's family to me, she's Lithuanian. This is unbelievable. This is like the best. I don't know. It makes me so happy. I could jump up and down, but that wouldn't be very German. Sort of feels like I've got what I came for here, really. I wanted to know where that hand that pushes me forward and says, work harder, do more, be better, comes from. And it comes from Emil, because work saved my great-grandfather here, and it, I suppose, saved my great-grandmother at home. But I've also found something else, which is a sense of shame that I've always carried, real deep shame, and I never knew where it was from. And it's here, it's that sense of being other, being different, not feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Sue has come to Lithuania. She's keen to discover where her great-grandmother Anna Tislau came from before she married Emil in London in 1901. She's meeting genealogist Regina Kopelevich.
Regina? Yeah? Hi, nice to see you. How you doing?
Hello, Sue.
Hello. How do I say hello in Lithuanian?
Labas rytas.
Labas rytas. How you doing? I'm not quite sure why I've come to Mariampol. Have I pronounced that right?
It's Mariampole. Mariampole.
Mariampole?
Yeah. Your great-grandma was born in the area. Can I show you the map?
Yes, please. Okay.
You have the map of Lithuania over here?
Yes.
And the red dot is Naminkai, where your great-grandmother was born.
Naminkai.
And the capital of this area is Mariampole. And as you see, it's so close to the border with Deutschland, Germany.
In the late 18th century, hundreds of Germans, like the Tislau family, migrated east to Lithuania, attracted by the offer of cheap farmland. Communities settled here for generations, keeping their religion and culture.
So farmers that came looking for, promised land.
And because your family, Tislau, they are of the German origin, probably they spoke at home, and they prayed in German. We were working a lot on your family tree.
Okay.
And we are very proud to discover all your great-grandmother's siblings.
And there's a lot of them.
Your great-grandmother Anna is the oldest girl.
Otto, Edward, Elena, Augusta, Albert, Gustav, Bertha, Johann, Helena, Anna, and Adolf Tislau.
And we know not only her parents, which were Johann Tislau and Paulina Hitt, but we also know your great-great-great-grandparents, Gottlieb Tislau and Magdalena Schaff.
So I've seen how close Navininke is to Mariampole. Can we go?
We are.
Let's do it. We're now en route from Mariampole to try and actually find the Tislau farm in Novoninkai, which I think I've pronounced incorrectly. And it's becoming incredibly rural. The tracks are getting bumpier, the snow's getting thicker. I would be surprised to get there and find luxury flats, but the hand of capitalism is long. Who knows? Sweet Lord, that's cold. I suspect this is the place I'm about to be told that all my ancestors died of hypothermia. Plus, I should get up this puddle because there's a history of trench foot in the family. Could they have picked a colder spot, Regina? Hello there, hi.
Please meet Algis. Algis.
Hey, Algis, labas. Nice to see you. So how come Algis is here?
He remembers the Tislava family. We came to see where the Tislau family was living. They had very big houses, a lot of land, a lot of animals, cows and horses.
What kind of people were they?
They were very well-to-do. They had a lot of farmland. They were farmers. Algis says that it was a huge house, the biggest house in all the area.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
it was the richest family in the whole area. Even today, this area is called by the local people Tislevina. It means that it's a land of the Tislava family, which is Tislau land.
I love that. We should set up a theme park immediately. Tislau land. But what's great for me as well, apart from the fact that their names lived on, which is wonderful, is that when I started this, I was sitting down with my friend Mel, slightly laughing at her that she had a place named after her. Gedroitas.
Gedraiti.
And it seems I have too. Might be a pile of icy mud, but I don't care. It's home.
So I guess I made the possibly lazy assumption that Anna's story was the classic immigrant one, that the family had nothing and that she left for a better, brighter future. But I've come here and it turns out that the family, albeit they might have come from nothing, made something here. They put down roots here, they had a big property, they had people who worked for them. So I have to recalibrate why she left, and I don't know. I guess you're always looking for a narrative that confirms the best in people, but I'm kind of hoping she was some kind of feminist badass, that she left because this wasn't right for her, that she was enterprising, she wanted to travel, she wanted to see the world, she wanted to make her own mark. I guess the other thing I'm thinking is, this has been described, this place, as the land of the Tislaus. So where are they? Because you can look, and for as far as I can see, there's no one. And where did they go?
Sue is back in Mariampole and meeting Professor Christoph Mick to find out what became of her great-grandmother's family, the Tislaus, after Anna emigrated to London, where she married in 1901.
So, Christoph, I wondered if you might be able to shed some light on what on earth happened to the Tislaus, because the land's still there, but they are evaporated, they've gone.
They continue to live on the land after Anna has left for the next 39, 40 years. But then when Hitler came to power, the Nazis in 1939 prepared their attack on Poland and agreed with the Soviet Union, at this time allied with Germany, Nazi Germany, to divide Europe into spheres of influence.
In August 1939, just before the outbreak of the Second World War, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, which gave control of part of Poland to Germany and gave Lithuania to the Soviets.
That's then the moment when the Tisla family had to make a decision what to do, whether they wanted to stay or whether they wanted to leave. And like most members of the German-Lithuanian minority, they decided to take up the offer of the German authorities to return.
Which is now Hitler's Germany. So presumably they can prove to the German authorities, I guess,
yes,
that they originally came from Germany and therefore had a right to resettle back in the motherland, as it was. Or the fatherland, I guess, now.
Yeah, they could prove that. Maybe you can have a look at the first...
This is such a wee thing, this.
Yeah. It's Albert, Anna's brother.
God, that's my great-grandmother's brother.
So maybe have a look at the next document, which will show you where the photograph comes from.
Oh. Anna Müller, my great-grandma's name. They're saying his sister is in England.
Yeah.
So this is the German authorities...
Yes.
...pinpointing where all his family are.
Yeah, it's a document which comes from the Immigration Central Office, which was set up by the Nazis, led by Himmler, 1939. Himmler was responsible, in principle, for looking after the German minorities in Eastern Europe, because they were seen as a valuable asset for Germany. They shouldn't get lost.
So they're basically gathering in the diaspora to shore up a cultural identity, to provide bodies on the ground for the war effort, to all sorts of reasons, I guess.
Yes. If you have now a look at the next document, please.
This looks like a family leaving, with all their possessions preparing to evacuate, essentially. Is this a photo of a similar family's predicament?
Yeah. So if you have a look at the next photograph.
So, God, that's really hard. That's a really powerful, horrible photo, because that's just people coming from Lithuania being cheered back by uniformed, suited, booted Nazis.
Yes.
That's genuinely one of the most disturbing photos I think I've ever seen, because it's the most awful moment in modern history, pretty much. And then to see this, to see somebody in my family caught up in it.
Sue's great-great-uncle Albert Tislau and his family arrived at a German resettlement camp in March 1941. Their paperwork was inspected by Nazi officials and their photographs taken. They were subjected to medical examinations, which were a cover for racial profiling. The Nazis had created 4 racist categories. Group 1, Aryan and above average. Group 2, average. Group 3, below average or of mixed race. And Group 4, unacceptable.
This was based on measuring the nose, the distance between the eyes, the head shape, things like that. Completely unscientific, but the Nazis believed in that.
How awful to find out if one's family have passed a test like this. Okay. Is it the top number?
Yes.
3.
There were 3.
They've scored a 3 on the special Nazi chart of Aryan magnificence. I mean, what a difference, you know? You welcome everybody, oh, great, the master race. Now submit to having your head measured to see what value you have. And everything now, even if they survive this process, it is directly, this is what really upsets me, it's directly at the cost of somebody else. If the head shape is right, somebody else's is wrong. This is a zero-sum game for humanity. It's just very upsetting. Anyway.
So maybe have a look at the next document. This is now Emilia, Albert's
his
wife.
I can see her siblings listed there.
You can see the 4th one.
Adeline.
Yeah, Adeline. Adeline was classified in Nazi terminology as deaf, mute, and imbecile. Today we would say she was deaf and with a learning disability. After her name, you can see it looks like an upside-down Y, this Nazi symbol for death, and the year 1942. Since 1939, there was a program to execute, to kill those with hereditary, especially mental illnesses.
Oh, sorry, Christoph. It's just hardcore, isn't it? I'm sure you've sat through this a million times, but it just feels like the whole family are just in a vice and just trying to do what's best, and it's just tightening, until eventually they're just, once they've been processed, you know, it's game over.
Albert and his family were never resettled and spent over a year in a Nazi holding camp. In 1942, Lithuania was now under German control, and the family moved back to their farm. In 1944, the Soviet army invaded. Albert tried to escape, but was captured. For the next decade, he was forced to work under Soviet rule as an agricultural laborer.
In 1957, he decided to ask for repatriation to Germany, and it was granted.
It's unreal. You'd have thought that I'd be able to look at all that history through the prism of just my family. It's amazing. Thank you, Christoph. That was quite a ride. I've gone from so mournful to wanting to smash the room up to just to sort of a kind of quiet now, which I can thank you for. I've never felt so tense, you know? My great-grandmother's family were asked as German Lithuanians to go back to the motherland, and they're then subject to being graded and analysed, and then in some cases murdered by a regime for whom they are not German enough. And eventually they return to Lithuania, and guess what? They're too German. And they're just pushed from pillar to post because they are ethnically blended, because they are neither one thing or the other, too much, too little. And then I catch myself thinking, well, thank goodness my great-grandmother's got out. Anna is in England. And then I remember she didn't get out. To the English in 1915, she's another bloody foreigner. She's the enemy. And you forget when you study history that there are real, everyday people and that they always pay the price for the decisions that the big guys make. So the last thing I wanted to do before I left Lithuania was to come to the church where my great-grandma Anna was baptised. And this is a huge thing in our family history because it's still standing today. Because up until now, every single farm, camp, church, house, you name it, has always been razed to the ground or turned into luxury flats. No way. No actual way. You are kidding me. Well, the universe couldn't have planned this better. I mean, if this was a story I saw written down, I'd go, no, that final scene's too pat. It doesn't work. I mean, what a narrative arc. Unreal. The Lutheran Church is now a boxing gym. It's incredible. I'm so blown away. I mean, I'd have been blown away anyway, but this has done my head in because everything always comes full circle, but never in such a poetic way as this. I feel so joyful, incredibly joyful. I couldn't have been more delighted by this whole thing. It's just nothing short of wonderful. I guess I always knew I came from what might be deemed humble stock, ordinary people. But these are extraordinary, ordinary people. Whilst this great swirlings of history going around them, they've worked hard and they've done amazing things both for themselves and their family and those who came after them. Whether it's Florence, who defied sort of social norms to go out and get a job and become a nurse in the earliest dawnings of the NHS, or my granddad Albert, who I never knew but I have come to love, who had no family, was orphaned so early on in life and yet chose his chosen family, the army, and he travelled the world with them. Or my great-grandparents, who I guess were flung from pillar to post in the enormous sort of whirlwind of sort of 20th century political history, and who came to England and chose to be British. So I come from a stock of nurses and army men and immigrants, and those are the people surely that make Britain what it is. Those are the people that make Britain great, and I'm very, very proud to have come from them, and I hope one day I can make them as proud of me as I am of them.
The new series of Who Do You Think You Are continues with Richard Osman in 2 weeks' time. Watch previous episodes on iPlayer now. Winston Churchill once said, "The further backward you look, the further forward you can see." Elizabeth, the Unseen Queen, on Sunday at 7:45 on BBC One.
This week on Our Sofa, we're going back to the 80s.